Hello, everyone, and welcome to this debut episode of The Nation, the revamped version of the Outlaw Nation that I've been kind of waiting to launch here on the Outlaw Nation channel. And a subject matter like yesterday, the tragic events of yesterday, and my conversations by happenstance yesterday with my co-host for today, my guest on the show here. From the CineFiles. You've seen him on Impolite Truths. You've seen him on reviews and other stuff I do here on the Outlaw Nation channel. My conversation with Steve Morris. Steve, how are you?
Well, I got to say, I'm angry. I'm upset. I'm sad. I'm thinking about my own family, and yeah, I mean, it's not been a good day, and I didn't sleep well last night, and we're going to talk about some hard stuff.
We are completely just needing a place to go to talk about it. And, you guys know I do entertainment, I do movie reviews, blah, 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 but, I have my finger on the pulse of politics, my finger on the pulse of issues. But this is something that transcends all of that, left and right. This is about our children. This is about our future. And what we saw yesterday, the events in Uvalde are just heartbreaking and tragic. As if we were just starting to get past the Buffalo shooting, Steve, the racist Buffalo shooting, inspired by the people who were spewing the great replacement theory that, Fox News is Tucker Carlson is making a cottage industry out of. And here we have the worst mass shooting, I think, since Sandy Hook, certainly involving children since Sandy Hook, but possibly involving anybody since Sandy Hook. And it was heartbreaking, devastating. 19 children, I believe 3 adults or 2 adults were killed who were educators. And they were all from the same 4th grade classroom. This wasn't a man who walked in and was going classroom to classroom, as we've seen in all the other school shootings. This is someone who went in, the 18-year-old kid, we'll say his name in a minute, crashed his car, shot his grandmother, who is still alive in critical condition, as we were updated this morning, walked into that classroom, barricaded himself in that classroom, and ended the lives of 19 children, and 19 Latino children, Steve. And maybe that's why this one is just destroying me more than ever, and why I've been tweeting furiously about it since last night and into today. And I thank everybody who's joining us live. And I thank definitely Steve for hanging out with us today. I want to get through everything. Steve, you heard the news come over last night. We come from it from 2 different places. I'm not a father. You're a father, but I love my nephew and my niece. That's the closest connection I have to children of my own. I can only imagine my rage, fury, and contempt that would consume me if something were to ever happen to my niece or my nephew. I can't imagine how much more personal it might be for you for being a father. So what were your thoughts as you were hearing about yet another school shooting here, and one that was incredibly tragic, and the first really a big one since Sandy Hook?
Rage, just pure and simple. None of us, I couldn't imagine what it would be like to lose my son, much less lose my son under these kinds of circumstances. Particularly thinking like, my kid's in 5th grade. I know maybe not the name of every single kid in his class, but I know most of them. A bunch of them have been to my house. A bunch of them we've had play dates in the park with. I can't imagine a whole community feeling that at that moment. And we all face tragedies in life, and we all learn to move on. And there's some tragedies you don't move on from. I was just listening to the Daily, which is the New York Times podcast, and they were talking about the people from Sandy Hook and the reporter who had spent the most time with it, and that, they're not past it. They're never going to be past it. The grief doesn't end. And even seeing this event like this, or like Parkland, it brings all of that back. I mean, what a terrible fraternity to belong to. This community of people who have lost their children in the most horrific and senseless way. I mean, it's beyond imagining.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've seen a few people come forward and speak about it. It has transcended, how can I say this? It's transcended just the political arena. Steve Kerr last night, before the Golden State Warriors took on the Dallas Mavericks, spoke very powerfully and vociferously, pounding the desk about the frustration he feels. And he's like, I don't care about basketball questions. Since our practice started and we just finished practice, in the time of practice, at the time, the reports, 14 children is what he says, because those were the reports at the time. 14 children have been killed. And he put a call out to the senators, to the congressmen, to just address this issue once and for all. And Steve, unfortunately, already we're seeing the backtracking that I don't want to split party lines here, but the backtracking that, and you know what? Why don't I not split party lines? Just say NRA backed, gun control lobby backed politicians, because there are some that are in the Democratic fold, which we'll get to a little bit later, are already trotting out this idea of mental health being this number one source, including the gentleman who represents Uvalde in the Senate, in the state Senate there, going on Fox News, going on CBS News, and spewing the same bullshit that somehow this is all mental health related and not about access to guns, even though this kid was 18, bought himself 2 rifles on his 18th birthday. And this was because Texas, under Governor Greg Abbott, reduced the age from which to purchase weapons to 18 from 21. So to me, I find this all to be cover so these people can keep lining their pockets with the gun control lobby money. Am I wrong to feel this way? You can find nuance, you find more specificity and complexity in some of these issues. I have my thoughts on it. So I want to hear what you think about this as you hear majority GOP people coming out and saying this is about mental health.
So no, you're not wrong. And here's the evidence, because here's the thing. Is mental health, both in terms of shooting and in terms of our country in general, particularly after 2 years of pandemic, a serious issue in this country? Yes, it is. Yes. I mean, you and I do ads for better health on the CineFiles.
We do.
Like, we do. This is an important thing.
Yeah.
But if that was what the issue was for Republicans, where is the huge mental health bill?
Yeah.
Where is the action? Okay, fine. You say it's mental health. I think it's more than mental health, but I agree. I think we do have a mental health crisis. I think there is issues with mental health related to mass shootings. What's your plan? Where is the plan? If it meant something to you, if you really believe that was the cause, then every single Republican would be rushing to create the most complete, most extensive mental health package for the United States in history.
Yeah.
Where is it? It's not there. And that's because that's bullshit. Yeah. That is just your way to deflect from this other issue, which is the almost 400 million guns in this country when there's only 340 million people.
Yeah, that is a lot, Steve. And just to give some numbers here, which I was kind of blown away by, the Gun Violence Archive reports that at least 213 mass shootings have occurred in 2022 alone, just this year. And we're only in the 5th month of this year. And they assign mass shootings as one in which 4 or more people were injured or killed, not including the shooter. This is the 30th shooting at a K-12 school in 2022. Let that sink in. That's the 30th shooting this year, 5 months into the year, in an elementary school or K-12 school, which is heartbreaking. And this is there have been more mass shootings than days in 2022. And this is, as I said earlier, the deadliest school shooting since 2012 with Sandy Hook. And we saw how Alex Jones made an absolute cottage industry out of calling that a false flag operation, that there are insane people in this country who are voters, call themselves American citizens, who claim that those were all actors. Those kids never existed. They claim it to the face of the parents who lost their children. At some point, the rhetoric here is not validated. At some point, enough is enough with that nonsense that you're spewing and you're saying without repercussion. There should be lawsuits for each and every person who says nonsense like that. There should be repercussions. They should lose their jobs. There's all kinds of things that should happen to people who believe this nonsense, because enough is enough with this nonsense. These are real shootings that are happening. And already we saw Paul Gosar, which I tweeted earlier today. He took the tweet down. Maybe I should share my screen and show this tweet to people who maybe haven't seen it yet. But he tweeted about this shooter and claimed that the shooter is a transsexual leftist illegal alien named Salvatore Ramos. It's apparently your kind of trash. He was responding to someone on Twitter. And he took that tweet down because he immediately got eviscerated on Twitter for it. But this is the kind of hate and anger and ugliness that comes out from that side of the political fence, majorly that side of the political fence, spewing this kind of nonsense to keep this rhetoric going and to keep this cottage industry of rage and conspiracy theories and madness filling their pockets with money. Are we not hitting a breaking point as a country with this madness?
I would have thought we hit a breaking point 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But apparently we don't. Apparently those breaking points are a lot farther than you or I thought they would be. As far as the false flag things, I went and looked. They're already out there.
Yep.
There's already people spreading rumors, showing why this is bullshit, why it's a fake, why it didn't happen. And yes, Alex Jones was sued finally. And yes, he lost that lawsuit.
Yeah.
I think, look, you know me. I am a huge defender of free speech.
Absolutely.
I am very much against pillaring people in the public square.
Yeah.
This one should be a fucking crime.
Yeah.
That is assault. I don't care. It's like you have your child die in the most horrific way, and you have people publicly in social media coming after you personally and calling you a liar.
Yeah.
That is emotional assault. That should be a crime. I don't care.
Absolutely. You're 100% right, Stephen. That's the thing that is, we're seeing more and more of the rhetoric. People are starting to speak up more and more, including a former Fox News producer, I think a couple of days ago, speaking out saying, you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. And what Tucker Carlson is essentially doing is yelling fire in a movie theater. And on his show, just a couple of nights ago, he had the absolute unmitigated gall to tell Democrats to tone down their rhetoric. Or de-escalate their rhetoric. This is the guy who was pushing the great replacement theory that inspired the Buffalo shooter to kill the 10 people he killed in a racist massacre there in that grocery store. And we don't know yet if there's a manifesto. They said there's no any kind of note or anything by Salvatore Ramos, who was the killer, the 18-year-old killer. But as I said, he killed his grandmother. He crashed his car in front of the elementary school. So clearly this is a kid that was warring with himself even before he got there. Because why would you crash your car if there are, parking spots all over near the school? But crashed his car, clearly wanting to make a statement. He engaged shooters, security people that were there. He still managed to go by. So the good guys with guns didn't knock this guy out. Then he walked in there and did his damage, his horrible, tragic, heartbreaking damage in that school. And already we're hearing people like Ted Cruz, and I may play his clip here in a minute, Ted Cruz saying things like, well, we need to arm the teachers and we need to hire security. So basically that's pushing the gun control lobby narrative of buying more of our guns to supposedly protect these children so that we can still make our money. And Ted, you can still keep getting donations from us every political cycles and every year. So this is just shameless fucking behavior. It's not about arming teachers who are already to the hilt of what you're demanding of them. And then now you're throwing the CRT on them. You're throwing the LGBTQ plus stuff on them. And then you want to arm them. Fuck that. They barely make a livable wage, a majority of teachers. And these people, these Republicans, want to pick on them and put all the responsibility on them and skate away scot-free. And that needs to stop in our society, Steve. What do we do here? Because the voters on the Republican side of things don't seem to want to vote out people who want to put some kind of sensible gun control legislation into place.
Couple of things. First of all, the hypocrisy of saying that we don't trust teachers to teach our kids because they might be grooming them or indoctrinating them into some, liberal, communist, whatever philosophy, but we do want to arm them is nuts. I mean, that's like just a crazy, crazy bit of things. And the thing that
isn't it? It's a cop-out, isn't it, Steve?
It's bullshit. It's like all the other bullshit. Yeah. And this is the thing. It reminds me of lowering taxes. In 1980, supply side economics starts. We say, listen, we're going to lower taxes on the rich people. They're going to invest. The economy is going to grow. More taxes are going to come in. Deficits are going to go down. And every single group is going to get richer. And what happens? The rich get richer. Deficits go up, particularly under Republican administrations, and the poor get poorer. The working class stay the same. And you know what their solution is? You know what we do? We didn't lower taxes enough. So they lower taxes more and the rich get richer. And they go, oh, you know what? We just need to lower it. We just lower it a little bit more. Then all of those other people are going to share in all this wealth. Same thing here. You know what? We got too many guns. Bunch of deaths happen from guns. You know what we need? More guns. More guns.
Yeah.
You know, now we have 120 guns for every 100 people in the United States. You know what? If we only had a little more, maybe if there were 2 guns for every single American, then all the crime would disappear. It's not going to happen. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of rhetoric from, useless people like Lauren Boebert coming out saying like, oh, we're not going to be able to legislate evil. Well, then why have any laws? I mean, by that kind of stupid rhetoric, that leads you down the path of you shouldn't have any laws. Then there's nothing you can do about it. If there's nothing you can do about it, it's so funny how they're the same people that promote the idea of Americans never quitting, yet they always quit on this issue. They always default to hiding out from this issue or claiming that people are politicizing this issue. This is how things get done. A tragedy happens, things get changed because of the tragedy as a reaction by right-thinking, sane, rational people, because they understand there's a bigger picture here that goes beyond party that needs to be addressed. We've seen it in Australia. We've seen it in the UK. We've seen it in, I think it was Switzerland and Norway after that horrible tragedy that happened in Norway. We've seen countries react, Western countries, first world countries, countries that aren't that advanced with their own issues of mental health, dealing with their own issues of mental health systemically. They make these changes, yet somehow we don't. And we have Biden last night, not even willing to name a party, not even willing to come out even harder, not even willing to put executive order to go after these gun manufacturers or gun runners, as I call them, because I think that's what they are, not even going after them because he's afraid to lose the election and the midterms are right around the corner. It's all this nonsense, right? And we just get so inundated with the bullshit and we just wonder what's the solution here as our children, our future gets killed, And I'm also cynical, Steve, watching Republicans who really don't care that much about Latinos not rallying that hard about 19 Latino Hispanic kids being killed in that classroom,
Well, there's a lot there. The first thing I'll say is that sadly, even if we passed waiting periods and background checks and red flag law, there's no magic solution that is going to make this instantly go away.
Yeah.
There are too many guns out there. It's too complicated.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we don't start. And here's the thing I keep thinking about is that for my entire life as this issue has risen, because by the way, this is a recent thing.
Yes.
The fighting for the power of the NRA, the fighting for the Second Amendment. Yeah. This didn't exist 50 years ago, but in most of my lifetime, it has. Yeah. And the thing I keep thinking about is, despite the fact that the majority of Americans believe in background checks, the majority of Americans believe there should be red flag laws and waiting periods, we still are up against people who say, you're trying to take my guns away. You're going to repeal the Second Amendment. You want to take all the guns. And we sit there and we go, please, we promise we're not going to do that. Please, just let's have a background check. And they say no. And we get down on our knees and we beg the minority to let us do one little thing to save a few people's lives. And they say no. And I'm starting to go, maybe we stop saying please. Now, I have no problem with hunters. I have no problem with people who want to shoot guns on a gun range. I don't even have a problem with a responsible, well-trained person safely keeping a gun in their house for self-defense. Right. But maybe we have to start threatening the big stuff. Maybe we do it to say, you know what? We're going to take every assault weapon away. We're going to take away every big magazine, every armor-piercing bullet. Maybe we should say, you know what? We are going to fucking come after your guns unless you start negotiating with us. Yeah. I don't want to do that, but you're leaving me no choice. Let's stop begging and start demanding.
I think that's a fair point, and I know people are going to resist and bristle at that, but I think that's a fair point. I think we've crossed the Rubicon on this. We really crossed it at Sandy Hook, but somehow, because we didn't have the votes and we didn't have the strength in the Congress, we didn't enact stronger laws. Now we go into this situation, yet another school shooting so horrific and terrible, and these keep building. And this and let me tell you something, as a man who believes in God, as a man who is, I don't want to say religious because I don't go to church. I don't believe in church, but I believe in a church. I don't go to a church is what I'm trying to say. I want to say to them, this is something that goes beyond political party. This is, if you claim to be the party of religion, if you claim to be a party of Christ, the party of God, It is whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers, as you do unto me. You have to take care of the children. Jesus spoke in the New Testament about taking care of the children. That's important. That's huge. That's massive. And we're not doing that. And, and Steve, I can't separate the rhetoric from a couple of weeks ago when you had Marjorie Taylor Greene and other people saying, we don't need to feed brown babies. We don't need to give brown babies education or food or anything here in America. We're America. Take care of America. This nonsense, and then claim they're going to church and claiming that God has chosen America. It's ridiculous. It's an absolute break in logic that makes no sense to me. Some made up lines on a piece of land shouldn't separate your care for human beings. If we are all God's creatures, which is what they say in church every weekend, every Sunday, every damn day, then it doesn't matter where they come from. You still have to care for them. And so you hear this and you hear this rhetoric, and I see this stuff and I just go insane about this. Is the mentality that's being pushed more and more. This idea of devaluing, dehumanizing human life, if it's of a certain hue or shade of skin, or if it comes from another country because, there's something historically, someone drew a line in the land on the ground, and therefore they somehow have less value. This kind of nonsense is what inspires people to erase humanity, to kill people like little children.
So, as you know, I'm an atheist.
Yes.
And as I've also said many times, in terms of philosophy, Jesus is my guy. He's one of the people I really think about. I think he spoke great truths. And I think if he were to look at the 2,000 years of what his followers did, I don't think he'd be that happy.
Bro, I'll go one more. I don't think the founding fathers would be that happy with what they're doing with the Second Amendment, how they've warped and manipulated and twisted the Second Amendment to mean something completely different than what the founding fathers initially wanted with that amendment.
So I just finished listening to the Chernow book on George Washington, which is excellent. And we could have a whole episode talking about Mr. Washington. But one thing that was interesting is that
YouTube channel.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing that's interesting about the framers of the Constitution, they thought it was going to be changed all the time.
Yes.
They didn't think that they had figured it out. They said, well, this is like the first draft, but obviously they're going to have to be changes because no one's ever done this before. And yet there've been very, very few changes. Yeah. And as far as the Second Amendment is concerned, there was a Supreme Court justice in the 1800s who basically said anybody who tries to say this means that every person in America should get a gun, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, is totally wrong. It's all about a well-regulated militia. That is what it says. And throughout all the way through up until the 1970s, there were literally, I believe, no gun control cases that made it to the Supreme Court, and very few in the smaller courts, because everyone kind of agreed that of course we can have laws about guns. That's natural. And as it came up on the CineFiles very recently, is that the very first, one of the big movements in the modern gun control movement came from Ronald Reagan to regulate guns that were owned by the Black Panthers because they wanted to carry openly. So when a bunch of black people said, well, we want to carry guns, whoa, you can't do that. But
any threat to the white power structure, of course, they're going to immediately enact rules. But go ahead.
The NRA was founded to improve marksmanship so that if we had to go to another war, we would have people who were better with guns. And the NRA, throughout its history, was all about gun safety. It was all about being good citizens. It was all about those things. It was never about being able to take on the government, or it was never about gun control until a revolution in the NRA in the 70s. And it was only then that we got this from my cold dead hand philosophy, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's usually old white dudes are spewing that bullshit too. Just like Kissinger lately, let Ukraine, Ukraine, you should give this piece back to Russia. Be quiet. Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut said this only happens in this country and nowhere else. Nowhere else do little kids go to school thinking that they might be shot that day. Nowhere else does that happen, but here in the United States of America. This was in the well of the Congress yesterday. He said, it is a choice. It is our choice to let it continue. What are we doing? And he absolutely got on his knees as you talked about earlier, Steve, people getting on their knees. He got on his knees and he said, I understand my Republican colleagues will not agree to everything I may suggest, but there is a common denominator that we can find. There is a place where we can achieve agreement. That may not guarantee that America never again sees a mass shooting. They may not overnight cut in half the number of murders that happen in America. That will not solve the problem of American violence by itself. But by doing something, we at least stop sending this quiet message of endorsement. That's powerful to these killers whose brains are breaking, who see the highest levels of government doing nothing, shooting after shooting. What are we doing? Why are we here? What are we doing? And I think these are powerful calls. Yet you have people like Mitch McConnell coming out and not in any way speaking about it, other than, the standard thoughts and prayers and sending them up to heaven and all of that nonsense. And then and Cruz coming out and saying they're politicizing it. And as I said, even the gentleman who represents Uvalde, which I will bring up here in a second, was on Fox News and CBS saying that it's mental health, it's mental health, it's mental health. My guess is that guy's a Republican. My guess is there's been donations to his campaign from the gun lobby. So this is heartbreaking because this is children's blood on their hands. There's children's blood on all our hands who don't do anything to stop this, who don't vote in a certain way to stop people who are pro-guns from being in positions of power. And now, as we see the Supreme Court starting to wield its conservative agenda, Steve, there's an even more stronger fear here that even if you were to pass a law and there was lawsuits against the law, the conservative majority in the Supreme Court would side on the gun owner's side, or the people who are pro-gun control lobby. And that's scary. So Biden, at some point, brother, there's got to be stronger statements. And if he loses in 2 years, he loses, but at least he's enacting something strong for now, for 2 years, that Democrats can rally against. And Democrats will rally for, rather, and Democrats will show up. We're seeing, Steve, the highest numbers of voters pre-voting in Georgia for that primary than we've ever seen as a reaction to the more restrictive laws. So that tells you voters understand the severity of these issues. We can't give up. We can't quit. We have to keep fighting. We need to be louder. And as Steve said earlier, we need to stop asking politely. The game is over for asking politely, because that bullshit does not work.
Well, let me first address this. The Democrats are politicizing the event. Let's address that first. If what you said is true, and of course it is, that there have been more mass shootings this year than there have been days.
Yeah.
There is no way to talk about it when you're not right after a mass shooting.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Which is why they frame it that way.
Yeah, it's like, so anytime you talk about it, you must be politicizing it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is well, have Democrats talked about this when it wasn't right after one of these huge, horrible ones? Yeah, we've talked about it all the time.
Yeah.
So let's put that politicizing thing aside.
Yeah,
that is bullshit.
Yeah.
Then let's talk about the fact that they don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
They're not offering any solutions.
Yeah.
That's a big deal here. We're saying, hey, we would like to do this. We would like to do this. We would like to do this. What's their plan?
Right.
And if they have no plan, if you don't have a way to work on this problem, then get the hell out of the way. Yeah. That's what I think. The other thing I think that's really important to stress is, while these are huge tragedies and incredibly upsetting and, unbelievably terrible things to happen to these families, they represent only a tiny fraction of the number of gun deaths in America each year.
Yeah.
And this year, I believe, 2021 was the biggest year ever. It's like 45,000 deaths by gun, of which almost half are suicides. And the vast majority, or not the vast majority, but the biggest group there is veterans.
Yeah.
And so we have to talk, again, these are the mental health issues.
Yes.
How are we going to help our veterans? I mean, it's like since the 9/11, there have been something like 150,000 veterans who've killed themselves. Whereas there are 7,000 veterans who died actually in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
150,000 veterans have killed themselves.
Yeah.
So what are we doing about that?
Nothing. It's always lip service, right? And we don't want to get too far off the issue, but these things are kind of interconnected in that.
Yeah.
If it's mental health bleeds into all our areas of society, and we should be breaking the stigma, which means Republicans need to bring up mental health as much as Democrats bring up mental health in a way that isn't scoffing or derisive or condescending, because the only time they mention mental health is after a shooting.
Yep.
You know, AOC spoke about the trauma of being involved in that attack in the Capitol. And you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and other people on the Republican side of things laughing at her speaking about her trauma. There's no understanding of how mental health how that kind of stuff can affect a person's mental health. There is ridicule. There's still that rhetoric within the GOP of you got to be tough. You need to be tough. Get over it, which is, of course, utter nonsense, because a bunch of them don't get over it, which is their own tragedies and their own life issues, which is why some of them have become so embittered and angry and pass legislation like this that is so inhumane and disrespectful, so they can line their pockets, you know. And we're at the half-hour mark of the conversation here, and I just want to, I see a super chat that's come in, a stream that's come in. If you want, I'm not asking for any today because this is a show that we want to talk, but if you want to send in any Streamlabs or super chats to have us talk about it, all of that money will go to a charity for Uvalde, for the victims for the families. So whatever you want to send in, if you want to send in, and I'm not asking you to, but if you want to send stuff in, you see the Streamlabs address up on the graphic there. And also you can send in your super chat. I will accumulate the money and I will send that as a donation with a little of my money as well thrown in there to whatever charity they set up for the families there. So just letting you know. So real quick, we have one that rolled here through Steve Doug Developer saying, the GOP makes it all about mental health, but they don't do a damn thing in making therapy any cheaper. Though I'm fortunate enough to afford it, I still hesitated to pay $3,000 out of pocket for sessions, which most Americans, I'm sure, can't afford.
Yep. And I think we have established, and you and I agree 100% that mental health is health. You know?
Yeah.
It is actually part of health. I mean, I want to just keep going a little bit more on gun deaths. Is that tragically in 2020, for my entire life, the number one threat to kids and teenagers was cars.
Yes.
That was the number one way that kids and teenagers were going to die.
Right.
Well, guns passed it in 2020.
Yeah.
In 2020, guns became the number one cause of death for people 1 to 19 years old. There were almost 4,500 deaths from guns in the United States in 2021.
Yeah.
So we talk about the mass shooting thing, and we should talk about it. It's a big deal. Yeah. But we should also be talking about that. I think it's about 35% suicide, 65% homicide.
Yeah. And how many of those gun deaths are children messing around with guns as well that are in their house? We've seen those numbers and those statistics as well, Steve, come through. And that's really devastating and heartbreaking to look at as well. YMB just saying, thanks, Rocha, Steve, for this important conversation. You're welcome, man. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to 190 of you who are joining us live. We appreciate it madly. Please hit a like on this video as you're watching. And if you're watching it later, please leave a comment down below your thoughts. Be respectful, be understanding, be cool. Don't be a dick. I will delete your comment. So you can waste 30 minutes writing 7 paragraphs. I get the notices on my phone immediately. And if your comment is a terrible comment, I'm going to delete it. So you'll have wasted all that time for nothing. So if you want to post a comment, post something constructive, post something that's open to have a conversation and have a back and forth debate that's respectful. But as I said, if you post something and you're being a dick, male or female, I will delete it. Just letting you know. All right. And JMB saying something here. Not only are they obstructing, one side is rolling back basic rights to 50 years ago, enacting voter suppression as soon as the SCOTUS removed the provision in the VRA. Yeah, for sure. And I agree. Andy's saying we need to keep this same energy with all gun violence, not just when these mass shootings happen. 1,000%, Andy. But like as I pointed out at the beginning, and as Steve also spoke about, if we've got more shootings than days, it is exhausting to be putting that kind of energy out every day about these shootings. It's the bigger shootings that somehow break through into the pop culture zeitgeist for us to have normal conversations about, and for almost 200 people to join me live. If I went live 2 days ago about a shooting in Chicago or shooting in New York or shooting down in Texas where 2 or 3 people were involved, I don't think people would tune in the numbers that they're tuning in. So when there's a bigger one here, it's important to use a forum to highlight it and to bring attention to it, and hopefully in some small way put that universal energy out there to enact some kind of change from what we've been seeing here. And Steve, maybe I'm a bit unfair on this, but I go back and forth on this all the time. If you have a platform on social media and a number of followers, a large number of followers, and you're not using that platform to educate your followers when stuff like this happens, I really question, I just question that. I understand. Well, if you're doing it because you don't want to get into debates with people, you don't want to see horrible stuff for your mental health, you don't want to see negative comments, I understand that. I don't understand if you're doing it because you're afraid to lose followers, subscribers, patrons, or money. If you're doing it for that reason, to me, you don't matter. If you're doing it for the reason because you're afraid of the mental health and all that kind of stuff, then I understand. But you've got to use your platform. All of us have a responsibility to use this platform. So many people who are in the superhero world love that line, with great power comes great responsibility. Here is that situation. So if you've worked your ass off to establish a forum and get people to follow you in the thousands or the hundreds of thousands or the millions, and you're not using that platform to highlight issues like this and bring attention and want change, then you're shirking your great responsibility because you've achieved this great power and you're only using it to talk about superhero movies. Why don't you talk about real issues that are happening with real people, not fake heroes and fake villains in a fake world? Real people. You can still have time to talk about the fake heroes and the fake villains in a fake world, but also spend time talking about the real shit that's going on with the real villains, the real heroes, and the real stuff going on in our world.
So this is one where you and I disagree a little bit. I definitely believe with great power comes great responsibility, but I also think there are a lot of people spewing stuff on social media that aren't qualified. They don't know what they're talking about, and they're only making things worse. So, and particularly if you have nothing to say, my advice to you is to shut up. Like I don't feel like we need every single influencer to weigh in on the topic if they don't have something constructive to add.
Fair point. That's a good addition to what I'm saying, a good addendum. Yes, you have something constructive to say. Do your research. Do you not put knowledge out there, not put bullshit out there? That's a fair point. Yeah, absolutely.
I also want to go back just to talk more about gun violence. Is that 54% of the homicides are from people that know each other. And this is why the issues of having guns in the home is such a big deal, is that, and 50%, so just 4% less than the total, happen during an argument. So a husband and wife are having a fight and the gun is there, and that is why the homicide happens. If the gun is not there, it's much less likely the homicide happens. The number of women killed by men is much, much greater than the other way around. Frequently there's a pattern of abuse. And so these are where these ideas of red flag laws, of ways to stop this before it happens, are so important. Because even though these mass shootings are tragic, they're not the majority of the deaths. The majority of the deaths are people who know each other.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely true, Steve, for sure. Sean Barreto donated a very nice chunk of change. Thank you, Sean. That's very kind of you here. As I said, any donations, any Streamlabs or super chats will go right to a charity once the people of Uvalde set something up. Absolutely, we'll send our donations in. We need change today, so we don't need justice tomorrow. This is a line that Sean has said numerous times. I think it carries even more weight today. Thank you, John and Steve, for having this conversation. Sorry I can't watch it live, but I'm working. Thank you, Sean, for sending in what you sent in here. And he's right. We do need change today, so we don't need justice tomorrow. Sean, being an African-American member of this country and who has endured and seen all kinds of stuff in his life and heard from his generations of his descendants in the past there of the stuff they've experienced. And that's a fair point, and now watching what we're seeing here, Steve, this is to me blood money. This is all gun money is blood money. That's the way I look at it now because of the results. It's funny, the hypocrisy here, because you have people who are in the pocket of the gun control lobby. And again, I'm trying really hard not to say one party only, but the people who are in the politicians, rather, shall I say, who are in the pocket of the gun lobby, who vote that way. This is the end result. And these are the same people who jump up and go, if you're a Muslim, why aren't you going after Muslim terrorists? Why aren't you speaking out about it? And it's like, okay, hey man, these people killed 18 or 19 children. Why aren't you speaking? Hey, that's it's mental health. That's something different. It's all convenient bullshit to not face the truth that they've been supporting the wrong cause and to not get called out because they've been supporting the wrong cause. And unfortunately, too many politicians now are too vociferous about protecting that completely incorrect point of view.
So first of all, I apologize if there's a bunch of noise coming through my microphone because it is garbage day, which seems oddly appropriate for our conversation. I am so bothered by people that make statements like, why are Muslims not protesting terrorists, with not looking around and seeing the thousands of Muslims that have protested terrorists or joined the U.S. military after 9/11, or, you know, I mean, like those kinds of statements are really, really ridiculous. And there was something else you said at the beginning that I wanted to respond to, and it's been the garbage trucks and some of the stupidity threw it right out of my. Yeah, here's what I've been thinking about. And you know, I love science, I love statistics, I love data. And by the way, as I've looked through and tried to find data, it's not easy to find. So I really wish there was just really, really good statistics on gun violence. It's really difficult. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I really wish that we as a country would learn how to run an experiment. So you have two groups that say, well, I think the solution is this. And another group says, well, I think the solution is this. And I'm kind of like, great, let's try them out. I wish that we could have a city in America say, you know what? We're going to run an experiment. We're going to get rid of every single gun in this city, and then we're going to see what happens. And if homicides don't go down, well, then we were wrong. The problem wasn't the guns. And if homicides drop, almost to nothing, which would be my prediction, well, then we go, shit, that would work. I wish we could do that.
Well, yeah, that's a fantasy that I wish could happen as well. But there'd be legal issues. Claiming. There'd be just as loudly people on the other side. If it came to the result that you were thinking of, that, you know, the gun violence would go down, people would claim that they rigged the experiment to get that result because they had that idea from the beginning. So in the end, it wouldn't. I think we've come to the rhetoric place in our country where there are just people who are not going to believe a damn thing that is factual and right in front of their face because they believe something else. I mean, I was watching Will Perdue, who just got his ass handed to him by Brian Kemp there in Georgia. And they asked him yesterday or the day before, hey, will you accept the results of the primary, the vote there when it's over? And his immediate response was, well, if there isn't any fraud. And the reporter goes, well, why would you think there'd be fraud? And some local Yahoo who supports him chimed in, because Dominion's involved. So it's that kind of thing that you're like, this is madness. This is just what keeps this idea of using the uneducated or the easily manipulated into believing this nonsense. We come to these conclusions. We come to these people who vote not in the self-interest of the country, but in the self-interest of suppose this idea of like, we know better. We've got our finger on the pulse of the conspiracies and they're trying to take our guns because they want to control us. I just find such a disconnect in that when a majority of the authoritarian regimes or kind of slightly authoritarian regimes have always been from the GOP side of things when they're president. I was looking at the amount of times that's happened in this country where they've tried to destroy benefits and destroy good positive things for human beings in this country. And it's almost always when a Republican is in the presidency. And that's really frustrating. And here we have again with abortion, that kind of being moved out now. And now these gun laws, there seems to be no desire to put it forward. We haven't had a head of the ATF since 2016. And the guy who is doing it, Biden's original guy, last year withdrew his nomination because he had spoken out for gun control.
Yep.
Now, this guy who they're interviewing now, I was reading about it this morning here over breakfast. The guy they're looking at now, he is very clear to say, well, I'm not going to be policy driven. And this is the nonsense you have to walk. You have to be in order to get Republican votes. And I just find that to be just so maddening, just absolutely maddening. No one wants to take away your guns. We just want to create a more respectable society We want to respect. We want to create a society that understands there are limits to things like wearing a seatbelt, like all these kinds of things that are better for the greater good. And that's what when you say you love America, wanting the best for the greater good is about loving America. Arming America is not the best for the greater good, because you saw what happened in the Old West. How did that work out? It's kind of stuff is nonsense. And we've seen gun violence go down. I think President Joe Biden was talking about it, how when they put the ban on the assault rifles, gun violence went right down. When the assault rifle ban was taken off, gun violence shot right back up, triple what it was before.
Crazy. It's weird how that happens.
Yeah.
If you allow weapons that allow you to kill more people, it's weird that more people get killed.
Yeah.
Just strange. You know what I keep thinking about is, there's that image of the snake eating its own tail, which is called like Ouroboros or Ouroboros. I forget. It's something like that. I don't. Yeah. That's what I think has happened in our world, which is that we got this idea that the way to fire up the base is to give them something more extreme. And that's how you get power. And then you have to keep, shoveling more coal and making it more extreme. And then suddenly the base is in charge. And so now you got your power, but the only way to keep your power is to bow down to Trump and to the base and to the NRA and to the most extreme views. And so it's the snake eating its own tail. Yeah. The more you do that, the more extreme that base becomes, and the less power you actually have in the quest of having any power at all. And it just keeps getting worse and worse until somebody stands up and says, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. I want to play this for you all, because I mentioned it earlier, Steve. I want to maybe take a little bit of a break of us talking and listen to some words from Steve Kerr here. He's speaking about the situation very powerfully here, as I said before, the NBA playoffs last night.
Nothing's happened with our team in the last 6 hours. We're going to start the same way tonight. And in the last 10 days, we've had elderly left shoot around. 14 children were killed 400 miles from here. And a teacher. And in the last 10 days, we've had elderly Black people killed in a supermarket in Buffalo. We've had Asian churchgoers killed in Southern California. And now we have children murdered at school. When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. I'm so tired of I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough. There's 50 senators right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power. So I ask you, Mitch McConnell, I ask all of you senators who refuse to do anything about the violence in school shootings and supermarket shootings, I ask you, are you going to put your own desire for power ahead of the lives of our children and our elderly and our churchgoers? Because that's what it looks like. It's what we do every week. So I'm fed up. I've had enough. We're going to play the game tonight, but I want every person here, every person listening to this, to think about your own child or grandchild or mother or father or sister, brother. How would you feel if this happened to you today? We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence. Yeah, go Dubs, Come on, Mavs, let's go. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go play a basketball game. And 50 senators in Washington are going to hold us hostage. You realize that 90% of Americans, regardless of political party, want background check, universal background check. 90% of us, we are being held hostage by 50 senators in Washington who refuse to even put it to a vote, despite what we, the American people, want. They won't vote on it because they want to hold on to their own power. It's pathetic. I've had enough.
Yeah, Very strong statement, Steve, from a gentleman who doesn't have to say anything, Steve. He's a coach of a basketball team in the NBA playoffs, but he has been one of the people, along with Greg Popovich and Doc Rivers and a few other coaches, who have used their platform to speak out very powerfully. And he's a man of faith as well, Steve. And Steve Kerr is Steve, and he is clearly very emotional and distraught and devastated by this news, and feels it deep in his bones, for sure.
Well, and I, you follow sports much more than me, but knowing that he lost his father to gun violence,
yes,
it's got to resonate really powerfully.
Yeah,
it's funny. I've now watched that 3 times, and each time it becomes, because it's the truth. When the guy is speaking from his heart, it's hard to mistake. And this is the thing is, I honestly believe if America is going to survive, that we need people of conscience to stand up for what's right.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not it leads to losing an election, regardless of whether or not it leads to losing support, that we have to say we need to work to stop the needless death of innocent children.
Yeah.
And the fact that that seems like a radical thing to say shows that our country is in deep, deep shit.
Absolutely. And I mean, and the fact that he's calling out the senators, the fact that he's calling it by name, Mitch McConnell, and saying this idea that we are held hostage by these 50 senators, who, by the way, are the minority in Congress or in the Senate there. We are stuck with this situation that we're in, and he is calling on them to react. He's calling on them to speak out more vociferously about this situation. And that's where I get really frustrated, is because we keep waiting and waiting and waiting for them to have any shred of humanity. And at some point, aren't we done waiting for them to have any shred of humanity? Shouldn't we be calling them out daily, 24/7, hounding them, like people hounded these people who voted against Trump? They showed up at airports and hounded them at airports. And I think that's the thing that needs to happen, because it's so frustrating that we're not becoming more active in our calling out of these people, and people like Ted Cruz. I want to play Ted Cruz's comments here just so we show both sides of this.
When there's a murder of this kind, you see politicians trying to politicize it. You see Democrats and a lot of folks in the media whose immediate solution is to try to restrict the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. That doesn't work. It's not effective. It doesn't prevent crime.
He has no basis for that point of view, does he, Steve? I mean, in my opinion, does he have any basis for that point of view at all?
Well, we mentioned the statistics of when there was an assault weapon ban, there were fewer of these, and when the assault ban expired, then there were more.
Yes.
So, I mean, what's so difficult is that there is no perfect solution. So it's not like we pass one of these laws and the next day all murders disappear. That's not going to happen. Right. And so that means that there will always be weapons for the other side to say, whoa, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
As opposed to going, if it prevents one kid from being killed, that was pretty good. We should maybe do that. And the thing is, nobody has said I'm angry, and I'm more willing to do more aggressive things than I would have been before. But basically, the entire history of the gun control lobby has never said we want to take away all your guns.
No.
All they've said is, hey, wait a week before you get to buy it.
Right.
All we've said is, like, maybe we should do a background check and see if you're a terrorist. Maybe that's a good idea. No one's saying take away guns from law-abiding people. Yeah,
you're right, Steve, to point that out. And to me, I don't know if I said this before on the show, on any show that we've been on, but I feel like I have mentioned this before, so I want to reiterate it. It brings me to mind of Harry Lime in The Third Man. And we've covered that. We've talked about that film a number of times. I believe we did it on the CineFiles.
We did, yeah.
And remember when he's up on the Ferris wheel or wherever they're up on, whatever that ride is, and he's talking to Joseph Cotton, and he says, you care about those people when you're ground the rubble, but look, when you're all the way up here, they look like little ants. And I think that's what people who are in the pocket of the gun lobby see human beings as, see these statistics as, that they're just far away, so I don't have to connect my own humanity to them. And so I can kind of move past it or forget about it, or let it go through a cycle of 2 or 3 days. of rage and then, keep making my money. And it doesn't affect me personally because I'm not on the ground level, because I'm way up here making the money that I'm making. I'm not going to a grocery store and buying a gallon of milk like someone else is doing that for me. I'm sitting up here, and that's what you're seeing. And I think that's what makes it, sadly, so easy for these people to remove their humanity when you look at the deaths of children and say it's, the Democrats and the media. And look at the way Ted Cruz looked into the camera, restrict right into the camera. So he's playing to his sad ass base. And I find that to be so frustrating because there is no repercussion for this other than voting. There is no repercussion for this. There is no lawsuits against Ted Cruz. There is no, I think people who lose their children to gun violence should be able to sue every senator who voted against gun control, every representative who voted against it, regardless of party. They should be able to sue them into bankruptcy, into poverty, because that's the end result. They lost something they love. So let's take away something you love, which is your job or your status or your power. And that's what needs to be the motivation here. And I'm really, really sick and tired of the pussyfooting of Democrats around all these issues. Put your guts out there, stomp proudly, and call people out. I mean, AOC called out down in Texas a pro-gun lobby Democrat who the Democratic system was supporting and pushing and what have you. She has no fear in calling out this thing because it's about the overall correct thing to do and the bigger picture. And more people need to come forward to speak about that and call it out, no matter what side of the political fence it's happening on.
I totally agree. And I just thought of a good thought experiment. If you want to figure out who is politicizing an event, and one group is proposing solutions and the other group is saying the first group is politicizing the event, which one's playing politics? That's who's politicizing the event. And again, if the first thing Ted, and I haven't seen the whole statement, and so maybe he did say this, but if he said, this is just an absolutely terrible tragedy, and we all have to work together to find out a way to prevent this from ever happening again, and I'm willing to reach across the aisle, and I'm willing to entertain any solution, any way to stop this. If he had said that first, which maybe he did, then maybe I would give him some credence.
He didn't. We just saw him. He didn't, Steve. Yeah.
Well, I didn't see what he said before. I haven't seen every statement he's made. I don't know. I'm assuming he didn't say that.
Well, here, let me help you with another statement he made.
Sure.
As well, and you get your thoughts on this as well here as we listen to this.
We know from past experience that the most effective tool for keeping kids safe is armed law enforcement on the campus. Inevitably, when there's a murder of this kind, you see politicians try to politicize, to try to restrict work.
So he's proposing, as I said earlier, the idea of having an armed presence on the campus of all these colleges. All these schools, high schools, colleges, and what have you. An incredible amount of money would be spent to make that happen. And guess who is going to benefit from that extra money being put out by the government to these gun manufacturers so they can issue and make more weapons to these people to have them be out there. And this shooter was confronted by people with weapons. They were shot. 17 other people were injured in this whole shooting, besides the 19 people that were killed. So this is what Ted Cruz is talking about, Steve. And then he issued some tweet about sending up prayers, him and his wife sending up prayers and stuff to the family, but no comment about coming together and finding sensible solutions at all.
Well, let's start with that beginning of that statement where he says it has been shown that the only way to stop gun violence like this is with armed people protecting people. And it's like, when was that shown?
Yeah, it was never shown.
It's like there was an armed guy at Parkland and he went and hid, is my understanding.
Yes, he did. The sheriff did. Yeah.
Yeah. In this instance, there were guys shooting at him, but they weren't able to stop him. There was the one, I think it was in Texas a couple of years ago, where they did chase down a bunch of armed people. I think it was at a church, did chase down someone. It's not that it doesn't happen. Right. Again, statistics on these things are really hard to find, but I really have been looking for good guy with gun statistics, because that's the narrative of the Second Amendment folks. Like, the solution to a bad guy with gun is a good guy with gun. Well, we know that we have 25,000-ish deaths, homicides from gun violence. The statistic I found, this was from 2016, was that there were 260 incidents of civilians just using guns to stop violence.
Yeah.
260 versus 20,000 homicides.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I am saying it's unlikely to be an effective deterrent.
Yeah. Jesus, it's just I don't know. It's just I'm just wanted to do this show today to have a place to come and talk about it, because this one, for whatever reason, this one decimates me a bit more than the other ones that were coming in. I believe it's probably because it's Latino children, and the fact that it was a Latino shooter or Hispanic shooter, 18-year-old kid. And there have been reports that he had issues at home, that he was bullied quite extensively about his financial situation, about his, I think, lisp or physical characteristics, about his body. And that's another thing that we need to start legislating out of school. And we need to start really coming in hard on bullies. That's the next situation, I really believe, because that's where a lot of these shooters, especially these school shooters, take their anger, right? The Columbine kids were bullied all over the place. Yes, they were privileged white children, but they were also bullied all over the place. That kind of stuff needs to stop. We need to start having harder laws against bullies in situations like this. We need to enact stronger legal ramifications and consequences for bullies in elementary school, in high school, in middle school, in colleges, what have you. There needs to be stronger situations, like punishments for them as well, to kind of teach them to not act that way towards people, because this is the end result. They never seem to kill their bullies. They kill innocent other people, children who had nothing to do with him being bullied. Those children had nothing to do with it. Right? I don't know who the Columbine people killed, but no one reported the fact that they killed their own bullies. And that's the sad truth of it. Bullies get away with manufacturing, to a degree, these mass murderers in school shootings and in other places. And there's never a ramification for that situation. They're never named. They're never shamed into the spotlight. Nothing like that. And this has to change as well, Steve. We have to go bone deep on this, including mental health. Absolutely. I'm not going to kick that out of the equation. We absolutely have to do a better job with mental health. But we also have to restrict access to guns. We have to do better with the background checks, better with the mental health checks. And we also have to go into our schools and start looking at what's really going on here, and enact programs that are strong, and laws and regulations that are a bit stronger to go after these kids. Yes, I know they're not emotionally mature. Well, we're going to wake them up to become emotionally mature about this kind of shit. That's the goal.
So several things. One is, I do have to say that being white and or privileged certainly doesn't protect you from abuse.
Nope.
And there's a lot of statistics that one of the threads, and it's very hard to find, but one thread that does go through many people who commit mass shootings is that they are the victims of abuse.
Yes.
And abuse tends to turn around and cause people to abuse other people.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you've heard probably a lot in the press about this pushback against so-called social emotional learning at schools.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that was talked about during the Don't Say Gay bill. It's something that's been talked about quite a bit on the right in terms of indoctrinating or grooming our kids.
Yeah.
This is exactly what it's for. As a parent of a kid at a school where they talk regularly, social emotional learning is part of the curriculum. They are regularly talking about how to deal with emotions, how to resolve conflicts nonviolently, how to resolve them without hurting other people. Is it hard? Yeah, it is hard. Yeah. Does every kid learn it instantly? No, because grown-ups have problems resolving their problem, their issues with each other. It's hard to do. But I definitely think this is an important thing that we should have as part of our schools. Yeah. How do we deal with bullies? How do we not hurt each other, which causes people to hurt other people? That's something we need to work on.
Yeah, Absolutely. Steve, we've gotten some Streamlabs. I want to read them here because we've got to wrap up in the next 15, 20 minutes here. Sean Barreto already sent in. Mild Manner Comic Nerd donated. Thank you, Mild. I appreciate the kind donation. Said, just wanted to donate. Thank you both for your time in doing this. I appreciate you both. And Darina, more than the actual news. Thank you again. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And Darina and I spoke about the abortion situation a couple of weeks ago over text, kind of mulling the idea of bringing back Impolite Truths. I don't think it's going to happen, but certainly there are moments. And The Nation is, in essence, what the show is going to be. It's not just only going to cover politics, but The Nation is going to pop up whenever, and it's going to be about discussing issues that are going on in the world of entertainment, sports, politics, what have you, in our world, pop culture. That's what The Nation is going to be all about. And this was the debut episode, and why I felt this was the right subject matter to be inspired to start the first debut episode for this show. Artless 123 said, when will it be enough? The time for thoughts and prayers have passed. Now is the time to enact effective legislation for change. Thank you, John and Steve, for the discussion. Yeah, Steve, it's a very kind donation. Thank you, Artless. Steve, what's the legislation we're looking at here? What is it going to take for these Republicans and these gun runners who are masquerading as companies? What's it going to take for them to finally read the writing on the wall and have some shred of humanity and put in stricter gun laws, background checks, mental health checks, all of that, and yes, sacrifice some profit in exchange for that? What's it going to take?
Dude, I wish I had an answer. I really do. I mean, if watching a bunch of kids get murdered doesn't motivate you to change something, then I don't know what speech or bill or plan I could give you that would be stronger than that. I mean, again, the things we're asking for are fairly simple. Background checks, waiting periods. I think the age should be raised. It shouldn't be able to turn 18 and buy an assault rifle. Bans on assault rifles. Those are the things I think we need to do. Red flag laws. But what's going to get them there? And it's what you said before. As long as power is the most important thing for them, and as long as they feel they can maintain that power through the support of the NRA, they're not going to change. Yeah.
And we're getting this from the San Francisco Chronicle. Just after the Texas shooting, the California Senate passed a Texas-style bill that targets assault weapons and ghost guns. So in certain states, it seems like, and Steve, I feel like we're moving, sadly, and I said this, I said this 5 years ago, that I felt the Civil War was on the horizon, or 6 years ago when they elected Donald Trump, or when we elected Donald Trump. I had a feeling, and sure enough, even Trump a few days ago retweeted something on Truth Social implying that there's a civil war coming. There's a former president of the United States doing that. How unseemly that is.
Trump unseemly?
Right.
Unheard of.
But it seems like if you want to be able to have your control over your own body, your own right to choose, if you want to hopefully get away from gun violence, then again, in Laguna Woods, there was a shooting in Laguna Woods just a few days ago as well. But if you want to be in a state that enacts stronger gun laws, you got to move to these blue states, it seems like, because these red states and even some of the purple states aren't really enacting the strongest statewide legislation to stop this stuff from happening. And that's unfortunate. We're going to see mass migrations in the next 10 years, I believe, into certain areas, and we're going to become even more tribalistic. And that is what essentially is going to spark the battle, which I am so scared of.
Well, if you look at a map, which I just looked at it again, of gun violence by state, it isn't exactly always better in the blue states and worse in the red states, but it mostly is,
Yeah.
And it's not, and it's not that there isn't a lot of gun violence in big cities like Chicago, like New York, and in Los Angeles. There is, but it's still, by percentage, better than like Louisiana or Arkansas or Mississippi or Alabama. That's where it's the worst.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Jesus. Let's keep going with some of these Streamlabs here. I want to make sure we get them all before we kind of wrap up here. Justin Toner, thank you, Justin. Very kind of you. Says, John and Steve, thanks for having this rational discussion on this issue. We need to address gun laws and mental health issues. Ordinary citizens should not be able to buy the type of gun this shooter used. we should have restrictions that make sense. Yeah, he had 2 rifles, not guns. He had 2 rifles. He left one of the rifles in the car, and he apparently had a backpack full of ammunition that he had left. He was able to buy hundreds of rounds of ammunition with no red flags being sent up, no concerns at all. Because again, these retailers just care about the money coming in and not what you do with the bullet or the gun. You know, even bartenders in bars can get sued for over-serving drunk patrons. What's the difference here, Steve? Like, what is the fucking difference? And in a car, you're killing 5 to 6 people, maybe at the most, or maybe if you kill a bus. But here, I mean, you're talking about, like we said, more shootings than there are days in the calendar year so far in 2022. So do we start going after the retailers? Do we start going after the people who sell these guns, sell these bullets, that they're not being responsible in how they're doing that? Because I think that needs to be in motion as well. I think that's going to shut down a lot of retailers from selling weapons and selling guns.
I don't know how you do it. It's so hard. You know, there's been proposals of like, keep the guns legal, make the bullets super expensive.
Yeah, Chris Rock said that in a bit, which was great.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I just imagine. Like, you go to the founding fathers and you go, okay, you see that nice rifled musket you have that you can fire maybe twice a minute, and that's accurate up to 150 yards. Yeah. Check this out. And show them an AR-15, show them one of these, automatic weapons and what they can do. Yeah. I bet James Madison would go, let me do a little rewrite on that Second Amendment thing.
Yeah, he would. And they could do some singing. Oh no, that's Alexander Hamilton. My bad.
Hamilton. Madison's in the musical too.
Yeah, Madison is in the musical. You're right about that. But I mean, and this is the kind of rhetoric, you talk about Texas Governor Greg Abbott here. We mentioned it earlier. This is something he posted 2015. Shamelessly, he said, I'm embarrassed. Texas is number 2 in the nation for new gun purchases behind California. Let's pick up the pace, Texans. And he tags the NRA. Yeah, this is essentially, you'll excuse my French, but this is essentially him getting on his knees and sucking the dick of the NRA. And I'm so frustrated at seeing these guys, these politicians do this on both sides of the aisle. Again, let me stress that, on both sides of the aisle. And it's so frustrating to see this happening here. And this was just 6 years ago or 7 years ago, him saying this. And he's the one that lowered the age from 21 to 18. And he's about to be in a back and forth here with Beto O'Rourke in this race. And if the Texans don't choose Beto O'Rourke, I feel like in essence, if you're a parent, you're essentially dooming your child to potential death if you vote for Greg Abbott. That's my belief here. Because he wants to go even farther right to maintain his power. He's the one busing immigrants to come to this country to D.C., all this performative politics nonsense. Yeah. And people are dying in his state. There's all kinds of blood all over his hands. And they want to push the most strictest abortion laws that even makes Oklahoma blush in their approach. And that is scary. That's scary.
I think one of the, I will call them, innovations that Trump introduced is the double down. You do something heinous, get called on it, or some terrible thing happens, and rather than backing off, you double down. And you would think it wouldn't work. Yeah. And yet Trump has repeatedly proven that, in fact, it does work.
Yeah. Because Elise Stefanik, who had been pushing that great replacement theory, all of a sudden, Harvard educated, by the way, shamelessly promoting that to stay in power. A lot of people felt she was the one releasing those Kevin McCarthy audio tapes, trying to maybe lobby to get or using Machiavellian tactics to get herself in a position as a speaker for the GOP, because her ambition and her desire to be in power overwhelms her natural sense. She doubled down on the great replacement theory stuff the next day after the Buffalo shooting, even doubled down even more as she was being called out in the days afterwards as well. So it's just like, it's mind blowing that there's enough people that supports this kind of nonsense. And I don't want to feel hopeless. I'm trying to feel empowered, and I'm trying to make people who are listening to us feel empowered to vote people who are for guns, or at least who are for no gun control, to vote them out of office.
Well, it's like after January 6th, you had a bunch of people who aren't my favorite people, like Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, like Kevin McCarthy, who all said, okay, that's too far.
Yes.
All right, I'm done. Yes, Trump did this. We can't go further. And they dipped their toes into that direction.
Yep.
And then they switched back to the double down,
Yep.
and said, and if that can happen on an attempt to overthrow our government and murder the vice president, well, then of course they're not going to care about these kids getting killed. They're just going to keep doubling down.
Yeah. President Joe Biden yesterday spoke publicly about it. And to his credit, Governor Brian Kemp over in Georgia did not speak before President Biden spoke, which other maybe Republican governors might have. Not that I'm trying to give him any credit, because I support Stacey Abrams in that battle. But at least he had some sense of understanding. He also fought off Trump in his attempts to manufacture votes.
I totally give him credit. I think we should give credit where credit. We could still be against the person and still give them credit.
Absolutely. Against their philosophies, but still give them credit. Yes. President Biden said, we know common sense gun laws can and won't prevent every tragedy, but we know they work and they have a positive impact. When we passed the assault weapons ban, mass shootings went down, something I referenced earlier. When the law expired, mass shootings tripled. Gun manufacturers have spent 2 decades aggressively marketing assault weapons, which make them some of the biggest profits. The idea that an 18-year-old can walk into a store and buy assault weapons is just wrong. What in God's name do you need an assault weapon for except to kill someone? It's just sick that gun manufacturers have spent 2 decades aggressively marketing assault weapons, which make them some of the biggest profits. For God's sake, let's have the courage to stand up to the industry. But that includes you, Mr. President. So you've got to also stand up. Executive orders, legal means, whatever, strong arming some of these Republicans, whatever it takes. You've got to find the information or find the legal standing or find the ability to put things in motion that will help our children overall be safer at school. And it sure as fuck isn't bringing in security people, former military people who have had, as a former military man, I can say this, not all of them are 100% mentally healthy themselves. Then giving them weapons and rifles and having them police schools. Our own police kill the wrong people. Our own police have a plethora of body camera footage showing their misuse of weapons, and they're somewhat trained. So that's the idea of having even more people parading around in schools, intimidating children, indoctrinating them. They love to use that word, indoctrinating them into a violence first mentality is not the way to operate in this country.
Well, and I would be very concerned about the disproportionate effects this might have of children of color in a school filled with armed men.
And probably mostly armed white men.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's a great point.
I because this is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that people have the power to be good.
Yes.
But I also don't trust people to always make the right choice. And to make the right choice in moments of life and death and high stress, I don't think that most people are qualified to have a gun in their hands.
Yeah.
You know, we've already seen, as you said, police who are trained make the wrong choice.
Yeah.
You know, so now we're going to hand guns to a whole bunch of teachers and principals and go like, okay, because you know what? Things get crazy in schools, in elementary schools too. Like there are times where kids act out. There's times where there's stuff going on.
Yeah.
Do I want a teacher inches away from a gun? Well, and do I want a whole bunch of 18-year-old, 17-year-old kids in a room where there's a gun available? Because how do we know those kids aren't going to grab that gun? You know?
Yeah. And the cynic in me, Steve, goes back to this idea of the more you overwhelm teachers, the less qualified teachers you will have in these positions. So the less educated, less qualified teachers will now have to slide in and teach kids, and you will not get the same level of education that you got before. And without the same level of education, you come out of school less educated, which makes you more easily manipulated by the GOP. You know, I've seen the statistics. A majority of the Trump voters are not college educated voters. In non-college educated areas, Trump scores high. In college, even Republican college educated areas, he does not score as high. And that tells you the difference. When you have an education, you can see through bullshit most of the time. Now, look, Elise Stefanik is a Harvard graduate. You know, Tucker is a Yale fucking graduate. So it doesn't mean that you necessarily won't see through bullshit, but there's a higher probability that if you don't if you're not hungry for power, ultimate power or ratings or money in that level, you can be more rational in your thought process when it comes to a charlatan like Trump and some of the other members of the GOP and some members of the Democratic side of things as well. So this is the cynical side of me believes that that one party wants to have millions and millions and millions of uneducated people so that they can use them as easy labor to push around in a workforce and also manipulate them into vote against their best self-interests.
Well, first of all, the idea that most of these powerful people don't know it's bullshit. They know it's bullshit. Most of them know it's bullshit. I mean, yeah, I am sure there are some Harvard educated true believers in Make America Great Again. I'm sure there are, but the vast majority, Mitch McConnell's not a true believer. I don't think Tucker Carlson believes half the shit that he spreads.
That's true.
I think he just spreads it because it gives him power and money.
Yeah.
Like and to go back to the teacher thing, to take a group of people that we have disrespected, underpaid, overworked for decades, and then say, oh, and by the way, we want you to be armed guards too. Yeah. It's like, you know what? Why don't you pay them well first?
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you support them? Why don't you help support? Why don't you help fund these fucking schools that don't get the funding they need? Why don't you put your stuff into educating our young? Because the thing is, again, these school shootings are very rare.
Yeah.
Kids having rough times at school, teachers being overwhelmed, kids being lost and forgotten. That's happening every single day.
Yeah.
So, it's so disingenuous. This, we just throw a lot of guns in the school. That'll solve the problem.
Yeah. Which is, of course, just a phantom approach to the whole problem. I am too Fly Clam, and we'll close up with these statements because I got to get going. I know Steve does as well. I am too Fly Cam said, my heart was torn to pieces when I saw those pictures of the victims. I'm normally pretty numb to these, but this was more than horrific. Yeah,
I couldn't look. I saw an article that had photos of these kids.
Yeah,
and you know me, I've got a fairly hard heart in some ways. I couldn't look at them. Yeah. I got 2 pictures in. I was like, no, I can't handle this. It's too close to home.
I saw a few of these and got very, very emotional last night, to be honest with you. And so I didn't want to look anymore. I almost didn't do the show today, ladies and gentlemen, because I told Steve before we started, because this one just for what, like I said, I think it's the Latino aspect of it all, just absolutely a huge punch to the heart. But I'm powering through it. And I appreciate all you who hung out with us today and joined us live to talk about this. I Am Too Fly Cam finishes off by saying thank you both for showing your passion. Thank you for joining us, I Am Too Fly Cam. And then one last one from Sean Barreto. Thank you, Sean. Dude, you're incredibly kind. He said, I just want to say that I'm trying to get through my workday, and it's hard. It's hard because the worst thing about all of this is the majority of the people in this country want to stop this from happening again, but a small minority wants to do nothing. Yeah, that's very, very true. That's very, very true. And this is why they want to restrict voting, why they want to make it hard for you to vote, because that's the only way the minority holds on to any semblance of power. And even Trump said this in an interview, I think last year, 2 years ago, he let it slip out in a moment of a rare clarity. He said, if everybody could vote in this country, the Republicans would never have power again. And that's probably true. And so essentially they operate under this fear that if you make voting easier for people, Republicans will never have any say on anything, because as you stated earlier, or as Steve Kerr stated earlier, rather, in his press conference, 90%, I think it's around 80% people support gun control, logical gun control legislation. Over 70% support abortion. And all these talking points that are part of the culture war would be brushed aside if more people could vote. If more centrist thinking Republicans voted in these elections to vote out these people who are gun lobbyists, nuts, or gun lobby, or slaves to the gun lobby, we'd have a different approach to all these issues, and things would change in this country. But we can't operate with I used to do a thing called the forum, the future fear. It's one thing they taught me that I do hold on to. You can't live in a state of future fear. And we live in a state of future fear that I think the people who support guns do, by being like, well, at some point the government's going to try to take everything from me, so I got to be ready. As if the government's going to take tanks, as we saw in Waco and numerous other places. If the government wants to come for you, you can get all your friends together and stand there. They're going to come for you and run you over with a tank. There's not going to be a goddamn thing you're going to do about it. So this mentality that you're thinking that, if I have my weapons, I can somehow keep them off me, you're insane. This ain't a fucking Rambo movie. This is reality. And so this idea that that's why you have the guns is ridiculous. Limiting access, limiting the amount, doing background checks, doing mental health checks. These are the bare minimum that we should be doing because guns are a huge responsibility. As I said earlier, with great power, which are guns, comes great responsibility. Most rational thinking gun owners feel this way. It's time we had legislators and Congress people who felt this way and voted this way as well. Steve?
I was just thinking about something that will never, ever happen, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay.
Which is we got these guys who have become way richer over the course of this pandemic, which is a true sign of the unhealthiness of our economic system.
Yeah.
If we took the 20th richest Americans and they decided to offer $1,000 for every gun and destroy them, we could get rid of, I tried to do the math in my head. I didn't quite get there. But my guess is we could get rid of almost every single gun and those guys would still be rich.
Yep. But it's never enough, is it, Steve? For some people, it's never fucking enough. And that's the horrible truth. As we see Bezos tripling his profits, tripling his amount, his worth, but yet paying his employees crap and putting them through hell. It's the truth. It's the sad truth of it, man. All right, let's, Steve, any final words as we wrap up? I think I just said my final words. So any final words as we wrap up this conversation here? And once again, thank you to everybody who joined us live and donated and sent in. And also thanks to everybody who gave us a lively chat. Appreciated your comments and your thoughts. Steve.
I agree. Thank you to everyone who's here, and definitely thank you for everyone who contributed, and hopefully it'll go some small way into helping. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry.
Yeah. It's
okay to take a step away, maybe, and maybe you need that, and then take a step back in and get back in the fight. That's my final words.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The fight doesn't end. Don't quit. Don't get overwhelmed. There are plenty of people who feel the way we all do and want to have a better country. Don't let the minority feel like the majority, even though it feels that way sometimes, please. All right. Thank you all so much. Steve, where can they find you? Brother, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. It was 90 minutes out of your day. Appreciate it. Please let people know where they can find you, man, everything we got going on.
So it feels weird to plug at this moment, but you can find me at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. Of course, we're doing the CineFiles. Hey, we're in the middle of Ocean's 11 right now, which is as much a departure from what we're talking about as you could imagine. It's a lot of fun. So check out the CineFiles, check out Enterprise Incidents for Star Trek stuff, and everyone take care of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. As for me, you can find me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, the Outlaw Nation on Twitch. I will be at Star Wars Celebration. I'm heading out later today. Finally booked my hotel last night. It's a pretty penny, ladies and gentlemen. It was a pretty penny, but it's worth it. Look for my coverage for Star Wars Celebration. I'm going to try to do a live show every night, and I'm going to open the Streamlabs and Super Chat, so any of the stuff that gets revealed, I will speak about. And maybe y'all can help me offset the cost of this trip for sure in exchange for the information of what we're seeing there at Star Wars Celebration. So stay tuned to that for the Outlaw Nation every night. What else? Oh, yeah. And the podcasts, as Steve mentioned, the CineFiles, we do every week. The top 10 and the Geek Buddies that are out there. In fact, the Geek Buddy show will be coming out later on this afternoon from us as well. All right. I love you all. Thank you so much for joining us. As Steve said, wishing you peace, and hopefully we helped you all navigate some of this today. And if you're referring back to this show multiple times, thank you for letting us soothe your anger, your fear, and your pain as you confront this stuff as well. So we love you. All right, take care of yourselves, be well, and I'll talk to you next time with another episode of the brand new show here on the Outlaw Nation channel, The Nation. Peace.